Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. It's a snowy day here in upstate New York, so hopefully you guys are all getting better weather than me. But today's topic is kind of looking at your budget for the upcoming year, which as you guys are kind of coming out of the field, this is when a lot of you will sit down and review it and kind of put the plan together for 2026, which is great. And I'm going to go over like everything to look for, what common practices are, what some industry averages maybe. But the one thing I want to point out is that while this is a common time of year for everyone to kind of sit down and do their budget for the upcoming year, like this should not be a once a year exercise. This should be something that maybe now you spend a lot of time with your team and get the plan together. But as you go through the year, I highly recommend you revisit it at least once a month to see if you're on track to what you thought. The worst thing you want to do and the worst thing that can happen for your business is we get to July, August, and what you planned for today here in December didn't come true. You lost two key people. You didn't hire the people you thought you were going to hire. You had a truck engine blow up, so your repairs went through the roof. Like life happens, so you always want to have that budget adjusting as you go, so you're always in line and always pricing for reality, not based on assumptions from 6 months ago that maybe aren't really true. So if the one thing I can get you all to take away from this is not a once a year practice. This should be something that's done constantly. And there is zero shame in making the changes and adjustments to it through the year. So your hourly rate is always pricing for the reality of the day, not assumptions that, didn't happen. The biggest thing to look out for is the labor side of it. is hires not happening, people leaving, things like that. That can severely affect your company's financial health if the billable hours don't exist that you thought you might have, and then a whole bunch of overhead doesn't get recovered. And any profit you may have made is then used to pay for that overhead and wipes out your profit. So that is the key thing to kind of look at. But all right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, kind of work through a fake sample budget. Any point in time, any of you have questions, feel free to come off mute or whatever and interrupt me. Happy to take a detour at any time. Okay, so hopefully, as you guys all know, that under system system setup, budget worksheets, and this is where all your worksheets might live. So I've started. So what you probably end up doing is take your most recent one that you've got activated or applied, which you'll see here is the applied date. So find the most recent one. Once it's applied, it gets locked down into a read-only mode, so you can't edit that. So you want to copy that, maybe rename it 2026, whatever makes sense to you, and then start making your edits there. So I've done that. I've got this one started. So again, this is my fake company. It's somewhat realistic, but we'll just go through each of these tabs, what to look for, what to kind of keep an eye on, and then again, going forward through the year, where to double check things. All right, so the first one is labor. First page here is, I guess the big one thing to mention here is this should only be your people in the field doing production work. Your office admin, no, that's nice. Your office admin doesn't live on this. Your sales guy, your estimator, your design, this is only people out in the field doing the production work. We'll take care of those other people later on the overhead tab. So, and then I've got hourly and salaried within this. So on this here, I've got 4 hourly guys. Those are their wages. So again, if I'm looking forward, this is projecting 12 months into the future. Am I going to be giving any of these guys a raise? So factor that in. So you start pricing for that right off the bat. Are all 4 guys coming back? If I'm seasonal, like I'm here in New York, maybe I'm not really expecting to start working until March. All 4 guys, are they coming back? If not, take them off. If they are, and you plan on giving raises, factor that in. Even though you might not give the raise until April or May, start pricing for it now. Then we're going to look at hours. So total hours paid. So this is complete payroll through a 12-month period of how many hours you're going to pay them for. Then how many of those hours are unbillable and how many are overtime. So don't add overtime to this. This is all encompassing. And then we're saying how many of these come out of that. If you've been tracking with SynkedUP for a while, you can go look at your unbillable and kind of fine tune that a bit. If you're newer and you're not sure, or you haven't been tracking diligently, 15 to 20% unbillable is very common. Now, unbillable is going to cover any paid holidays that somebody might have, any paid vacation if you do that, if you do sick time, those are kind of all the obvious unbillable things. Then you might have any company meetings would be unbillable time. If you're paying somebody in the winter but you're not doing production work and they're in the shop repainting the skid steer or servicing the trucks or whatever, that would be all unbillable time. So think about all that. If you are someone that tries to employ people year round, but you're only producing work for 10 months and you have 2 months of unbillable shop time, you're going to have much higher than 20%. If you only pay them for the season, you have some major holidays, maybe a little bit of PTO, some company meetings. Again, 15 to 20 is going to put you in a pretty safe place. If anything, estimate high on the unbillable time. If you are wrong and you have too many unbillable hours and your crew is more efficient than that, great. Any of the correction there is going to go right into your profit. If you try to say, no, we're really good, we only have 5% unbillable, but they end up being 15, then you have to take your profit to pay that. So if anything on unbillable time, be higher than what you think and prove yourself wrong by being more efficient. Don't be the other way around. And again, as you track over time, you'll get a better feel on what you truly are. The other thing with unbillable to think about, are you counting for drive time in your jobs? I will argue that when the guys show up at the shop, they should clock into the job right away, load the materials for that job. The drive time to that job is all part of that job, and all those hours should be in the estimate and covered there. Some companies decide the clock starts when they get on property. Fine, but that means you have a whole lot more unbillable time. The other thing to think about with unbillable is if you're doing a lot of quoted work, say you're doing patios and you anticipate a 4-day job, but they often bleed into the 5th day, whether that's a few hours or a whole day, that 5th day is theoretically unbillable time because you've sold the job for X amount of dollars based on 4 days, X amount of man hours. If they go into the 5th day, you're probably not going to charge Mrs. Jones for that overage, but you're still paying your guys. So that becomes theoretically unbillable time. So don't pad your unbillable like you shouldn't fix it here by padding your unbillable. Fix it in your estimating by estimating correctly or getting the crew trained up so they hit the numbers. But if you're kind of still maybe a newer company or you're fighting some demons and getting things organized, and that happens a lot, like they go over constantly, inflate your unbillable a little bit. And as you improve that, like I said, you'll come down off that unbillable and that just pours right back in your profit. So again, to sum that up, if you have no idea, do 20%. As you track that, you can refine that, but that's all the things that play into that. And then obviously overtime hours would be whatever the overtime is. And then your multiplier, again, is typically time and a half, whatever yours might be. And then any bonuses you pay out here. If you're doing some kind of profit sharing bonus or some kind of gamified thing based on hitting hours, yada, 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 fine, great. But just put your best guess on what you think that'll be that you'll pay out there so that you still have a true profit at the end and you're not using that to pay out other things. Then the other thing to think about is, am I going to hire anybody else? Yeah, fully intending to hire a 5th guy here. Great. Go ahead and factor it in. Factor it in based on when you think they'll be starting. So if I'm going to hire them with the crew March 1, great. They'd have the same hours as these guys. If I'm going to wait and get this season underway and then hire them May, June, they'll have less hours, obviously. But then that's the thing as you go forward to make sure that you do indeed hire that person when you expect it to so that you have the right amount of billable hours to recover all of your overhead. So that'd be hourly guys, and then salary would go here. So if you have any foremen or whatever that are just paid salary, great. Throw them in here. their total hours. Actually, this should be. If they're paid full-time year-round, it's going to be 2,080 hours. And then if they're a foreman and they're in the field full-time for the season, their unbillable will be whatever, 200 less than that to match the guys, the 1,800 here. As far as an owner that is working also in the field, if you do not work in the field at all as the owner, your name's not going to be on this tab. You're going to be 100% in overhead. If you do sometime in the field, full-time, part-time, whatever it might be, go ahead and throw yourself in here. Figure out the amount of hours you're doing billable work. So forget your estimating, sales, design, management, all that aside. Truly in the field, sitting in an excavator, running a shovel, whatever it might be. How many hours a year do you do that? Tend to be conservative on that. Go less. And then if you end up producing more work, great. But you might not want to count on that. Then what I recommend doing for that is take that number of hours and multiply it by what you would pay somebody in your position. So if you as the owner took a step back, said, I'm not out of the field, I'm going to hire Bob to take my place in the field, what would you pay them to replace you in the field? Not doing your ownership stuff, purely in the field work. And I would say typically that's like a $30, $35, $40 an hour range. So take your number of hours times that number and put that for the salary here. We're going to make you whole with your entire salary and overhead. But what I want to do there is keep the average wage realistic and start prepping the company for when you're going to replace yourself doing the field work. Does that all make sense? Okay. So any questions overall on the field labor, hourly or salary, anything I said there?
So if you have a foreman that is salaried, but they do field work also, you split it between the salaried and hourly for how many hours you think they're going to work in the field, or should it all just stay under salary?
No, put it here. Yeah, so let me. And we pay him, I'm just going to make up a number here. This is not real. 60,000. And then if he's full-time for your 10-month, I'm again making up a 10-month season, then you'd have the 10-month times 4, so 4 weeks, 40 weeks times 40, 1,600 hours in the field. And then if you're paying them through the winter, we take 2,080 minus the 1,600. So this would actually be 280 because you're paying him full time, and then we'd have 480 unbillable. So he has 1,600 production hours.
Okay.
If he's also doing sales or other things, then he's working even less than the 1,600. Maybe he's only working 800 out of that. So we would subtract that out of the 2,080 and have more unbillable here. Does that make sense?
Yep. That's why I just wanted to make sure, because I think previously I was advised to split the salary between like 60-40, 60 under salary, 40 under however many hours. So I wanted to just clarify how I should set up that. So that
theoretically it does the same thing.
Okay.
If you're paying someone salary, keep them here. Have their salary. You're paying them full-time year-round, and then just figure out how many of that is not doing billable production work.
Okay.
So you would put all of it here instead of like Sean said. I've done the same thing. I've got a guy that's production manager to salary, but I put half here and half in the overhead tab. And
you can do that like I did with the owner. You can absolutely do that. It's all going to the same place in the end. So yeah, there's no right answer there. I typically just put the owner here and split that way, and then any other, as long as they're, I would say, doing at least 50% work in the field, I'd leave them on this page completely.
Okay.
If they're only 10% in the field and more overhead, then I would handle it more like the owner here. So whatever makes sense to you, just make sure that you have the right amount of billable hours. Unbillable, is all going to overhead anyways. So if you put it directly in overhead, fine.
For me, the way my mind works, I feel like that almost works a little easier. Like you said, if they're like 50% in and out, I could just enter their salary in and then just go, all right, half of their hours are billable and half of their hours are unbillable, versus remembering when I switch from here to the overhead tab, remembering what I entered. With my ADHD, I would probably switch back and forth between those two tabs about 6 times before I remembered what I put on both.
Right.
That's just me.
The thing to be careful of is if you say you have a salaried guy you're paying year round, but your season is only 9 months.
Right.
It won't be just half of the 2,080 hours, because the production season is only whatever 1,700 hours, whatever it is. So it's half of that if he's working in the field. So just think through that. Don't just do like, oh, he's half in the field, so it's 1,000 hours. Well, no, it's less than that because your season is less than that. The hours here, getting these hours as accurate as possible is going to leave the company much more better financial shape. Obviously, when you're brand new, you can make assumptions based on season and all that. But as you go and start tracking, the more accurate this is, the better. Any other questions on labor? Field labor, I should say. Okay. Then the next thing is going to be materials. These extra ones are. You can break we have lines here if you want to break out per vendor, per type. That's how it helps you get to it. But what we really care about is this total number. So again, if you have decent accounting, you can look backwards to kind of figure out what your ratio of materials to revenue is. Design build, it tends to be around 30%. More maintenance might be closer to the lower 20s, and a mix somewhere 25%-ish for broad strokes if you have no idea. But if you have historical data, go back and figure out your cost of materials as a ratio to revenue. And like I said, if it's design build, you're probably somewhere around 30%. Then you can kind of think ahead to where you think your sales are going to be and then come up with that number. If you're not adding a bunch of people, so you're not going to be outputting more work, your materials will probably be pretty similar to last year. If you're adding another crew, it's going to go up exponentially. So try to just get the best guess on what you're going to spend on materials. This is, again, all your vendor purchases, your pavers, your topsoil, your mulch, plants, lighting, grass seed, whatever it might be. If you do a lot with rental equipment, I would also recommend putting it here as materials, because you're charging that out to the customer like you are materials. If you're spending a couple grand in rentals in a year, don't even worry about it, because it's going to get passed along anyways. It's not going to swing it any great way. Any question on materials? Pretty straightforward there. Okay.
Fred, could you touch a little bit on, so what happened with us is basically taking that 30% for 2025, projecting a number that, like our 25 budget gave us a sales goal under where we came in. So just kind of, is it that ratio that matters? And then ultimately the man hour. And if we're either, I think, we just had a few projects where in the same number of hours, we were selling higher dollar materials. And so the cost of goods sold was up, the material cost was up, but then that also went up with sales, because in those estimates, there's that material markup on a material. So similar to kind of what you're saying with, rentals, either just being in the estimate and recovered. How would that work of sort of underestimating materials ahead of time, as long as you're kind of staying in that similar range? Is that as big of a driver as labor would be?
Not typically, because we're typically recovering most, if not all, of our overhead on labor. Some people will put a little bit of markup on materials for overhead, and then of course profit on top of that. So where it matters is how much overhead you're expecting to recover on your materials. So if anything,
because we have like a 20% overhead recovery, So if anything, we're gonna recover more overhead because we're selling more dollars in material.
Yep. Yeah, it's when it goes backwards that it's more of a concern.
Okay.
That's again to my point where I kicked this off, is this should be a monthly exercise.
Yep.
Am I on track to do 225, or are things swinging one way or the other for whatever reason? Let me adjust this. So yeah, so if you're covering overhead on materials and you're starting to come in like, I'm only going to do 100, yeah, I'm in trouble because there's a whole bunch of overhead I didn't recover. If you're trending to be 300,000, then great, you've just recovered more, you made more profit, everything's fine. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, then we jump to equipment. So here we have 3 tabs here. This first owned should be everything that's owned outright. No payments on anything on this page. I use $3,000 as the floor. So a purchase price of $3,000 would be whether it makes this page or not. Everything under $3,000, I'll talk to you about that in a second. So anything that you spend $3,000 on to buy and up should be here. And if it's owned outright, it goes here. So name it whatever it makes sense to you. If you have things that are exactly the same, you can lump them together. If you do, say this is 2 trucks that are the same, you still want the individual information here. You don't combine that. The program will do that for you. So your replacement cost, a lot of people get confused here. If this truck dies this afternoon and I have to go get something to replace it, what would I likely spend to replace it? So it's not what this old Betty truck that I've had in the company for 20 years might be worth $2,000. I'm probably not going to be able to buy, I'm not going to go out and buy another $2,000 truck if that dies. I don't have to go buy brand new, but what would I likely spend to replace anything here? So don't put what this is worth, put what you would spend if you went to replace this. So if you always buy brand new, then this is going to be the cost of whatever it is brand new. If you tend to buy something a couple years old, it's the used price of that. Then once you've bought that replacement, how long will you typically hold on to it? And then at the end of that period, what is this now worth? So it's kind of like we're replacing this. Don't think of the value of anything here. It's what am I going to spend moving forward if I replace it? The other thing then is whether you're going to do overhead or billable. For simplicity, we recommend doing everything in overhead, put it all into your hourly rate. That way you're not putting individual line items of equipment on estimates. You're not in trouble if you're going to do a walkway job that you think you're only going to use the mini skid steer. You get into it, you find there's ledge or a stump. You need the mini excavator, but you didn't have it on the estimate. Now you're losing money by bringing it to the job. If it's all overhead, every equipment is on every job, whether you think you need it or not. That's simplicity, makes it easier, especially if you're all design build. There are reasons if you have a 50-50 install maintenance to maybe do some of the bigger equipment billable, because Mrs. Smith's lawn cutting doesn't necessarily need to pay for the $200,000 excavator. There are reasons to do different things. So if you do something billable, all you do is flip it to billable. How many hours am I likely to bill that out in the year? And then it's not part of overhead. We're going to bill that as a line item on the estimate. And this is the price per hour. And we'll mark that up accordingly in the item catalog. The concern here is if you do billable, you're taking a guess on this. If all of a sudden the market shifts and you end up doing not a lot of big excavation jobs and you don't bill this out 500, you're not recovering the cost of it. That's just another thing to think about. There's no right or wrong here. There's pluses and minuses to different ways of doing it.
So got a question. You said something that caught my attention, and like we're about, you said something about 50-50 or something on the install maintenance. Like we're probably closer to 70-30 install heavy.
Yep.
But I've always felt like because I've got all of our equipment and overhead, and obviously it inflates the number. Mm-hmm. But it's on our number, for instance, it'll spit out, I think it's like $90, but we charge $80 for maintenance and we'll charge like $120 on install. So, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
It's working itself out, I guess.
Sure.
But
Totally. Yeah. Again, this is just where you get into semantics and different ways of dealing with it. So there is no right or wrong there. It's what makes sense for your company and how you want to do things. Okay, so that's everything owned outright. Then we have our leased financed. This is anything you're paying a monthly payment on, whether it's leased, whether it's financed, what it is, and what the monthly payment is. And what this is going to do is recover the entire cost in your overhead. And this is where we start to deviate from a true profit and loss budget, which only has interest on it. In true accounting, when you make a payment on a piece of equipment, there's principal and interest. The principal is on your balance sheet. The interest is on your profit loss. So when you do a profit loss budget, you're not accounting for that principal. That's technically coming out of your profit. And there's a whole nother tangent I could go down there. But by doing this, we're just saying, no, we want to recover the whole thing in overhead so that when I get to the end, I have true profit that I'm not taking to pay my payments and my salary and all that kind of stuff. So this is where it'll never match up if you do like a P&L budget with your accountant or something. Okay, so yeah, just listing, same thing, overhead billable, all that's the same. We're just putting the monthly payment in. Again, as you monitor this month after month, once you've paid something off, go ahead and flip it to the owned, remove it from here, which will therefore lower your overhead and your hourly rate can come down a little bit. So don't leave things on here unnecessarily if they are paid off, because we can lower that hit to your overhead. And then miscellaneous, what I like to put here is all those tools or power tools and small equipment that's under the $3,000. I'm not looking for the total value of everything I have. I want to say in the next 12 months, what kind of budget do I want to have to keep that kind of stuff fresh? So your blowers, your laser levels, your demo saws, small compactors, things like that. Like, what will I likely spend in the next 12 months? And what budget do I want to give myself to buy that kind of stuff? So $5,000, $10,000 is kind of a typical number for most companies. Any questions on equipment? Okay. So the next is subcontractors. So if
perhaps an observation on equipment under the owned, when you look at the life, probably want to be updating that yearly. If you have a truck and you're planning on replacing it in 10 years, now that was last year when you did it. Now this year you're going to replace it in 9 years, right? Every year you're going to be that much closer, or is that accounted for because of the replacement cost versus
accounted for in the replacement cost?
Okay.
So we're saying in this example, I'm going to spend $40,000 on this truck over the 5 years. So I'm putting $8,000 aside each year, 5 years. So I have $40,000 ready when I go to replace this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So the only reason to adjust that, I guess, would be if you don't have that $8,000 put aside.
Yeah, that's a different problem, Elliot.
Yeah, right. No, exactly. Okay.
Okay, so subcontractors. If you do sub work, if you use subcontractors, this is where you're going to put your best guess on what you're going to spend. And this is the checks you write to the electrician, the plumber, the tree company. Typically, this doesn't matter a whole lot. It helps to influence your end sales goal, but this is a volatile number. Some years are up, some years are down. Typically, you just have a guess. We never, or I won't say never, 95% of the time don't recover overhead on subs. So it doesn't matter so much. We're just going to charge it with a profit, and it's either going to lead to higher sales or lower sales, but nothing else is really affected. So don't stress out over this. Best guess, if you use subs, what you're going to spend. Okay, then we get an overhead. So this is all the bills the company pays, whether you're doing work or not. So we have your typical ones that most companies have listed to kind of make sure you think about things. Of course, you can add categories that if you have different things that we didn't include. So we start off with the advertising marketing, and don't worry about like breaking things up the way we have it, all we really are ending up with is this additional overhead number. So if you have things grouped differently, don't worry about trying to dissect them to match our categories. Just make sure everything's covered and accounted for. So website, $250 a year in hosting. If you're building a website this coming year, you're redoing it, that might be a $6,000 over the next 12 months. But then in 12 months, once that's paid for, it'll go back down to just the hosting fee. So think about those things as you're going forward. Don't always just be looking backwards. You look backwards to kind of get an idea, but then think forward. Do I need to adjust that with changes I'm making in the next year? So again, advertising. What am I going to spend on advertising in the next 12 months? What do I need to spend on uniforms for the crew? Do I do client gifts? Do I want to start doing client gifts? Budget for that. Then in bank and financial, you got our bank fees, typically $100, $200. This is overdraft fees, checking account fees, things like that. Usually low. Credit card processing fees. This would be the fee you're paying to QuickBooks or whoever to accept credit cards for payment. If you're passing that fee along, we don't need to have anything here because you're not paying for that. You're charging that out. I recommend, this is more of a personal opinion, so take it as you want, but try to get away from that. Figure out what you're going to pay in those processing fees, bake it in your overhead, and it doesn't look as nickel and dimey to the customer. Again, my opinion, you don't have to listen to that. I don't like to get, as a customer, be told, well, if I want to use my credit card, I have to pay another 3%. I'd rather just not even know I'm paying for it behind the scenes and just pay. So again, if you're charging it, doesn't need to be here. If you are collecting credit cards, figure out your best guess on what you're going to charge, and then the fees on that, bake that in here. Then everyone pays a little bit of it, whether they pay with credit card or not, and it's covered. You're not losing money in the end.
Brad, what would you recommend for coming up with that? Would you take like what your gross sales were, say, for the previous year and do like 3% of that as the fee, a blanket, or
figure out what you think you're going to do in sales for the year. Let's just, for easy math, say $1 million. You're probably not going to do $1 million via credit cards. So how much of that $1 million? Oh, it's mostly only my mowing, which is $200,000 of my revenue. So $200,000 times the 3 or 3.5% would be the number I'd use.
Okay.
And then again, this is again where you monitoring it monthly is important, because if you start taking more credit cards, or we come out with something that makes it even easier, more enticing for someone to pay with a credit card, and more comes in, great. Come in here and up that. All right, interest expense. If your only loan is with the equipment we already talked about, this would be zero. We've already accounted for that because we're collecting the whole payment over there. This would be any further interest on a business loan, SBA loan, a line of credit, credit cards, things like that. Oftentimes people will sit down with their P&L and fill this out. And if they just go by the interest loan line, they could be double dipping because we've already accounted for interest in the equipment payment on the other tab. So again, just double check that when you do this. Taxes and licenses are going to be not income tax, not sales tax, but local taxes, business taxes, contractor license, truck registrations, things like that. Typically $1 to $3 grand, I would say, is kind of where that ends up being if you don't know. Then we got equipment and truck maintenance. We separate it. Some people have it in one category. Again, doesn't matter. But overall, what do you want for a budget for repairs and maintenance? Oil changes, filters, new tires, tracks. Is old Betty going to blow a transmission this year? So I need to up that. Like things like that. Like just, again, you can look backwards to say we typically spend this much on repairs, but I know something's coming. Or maybe last year, yeah, we had a blown engine. That was a weird one-off. I don't expect that again. I'm going to lower it down to what we spent last year. Same thing on fuel. You can look backwards to figure out what you spent on fuel last year. But again, if you're hiring 3 guys with another truck or 2, obviously that's going to go up. So your best guess on what you're going to spend on fuel. Rentals, like I said, I usually put in materials. If you have a rental, say you have a loader at the shop that's for loading mulch and topsoil out of your bins, send on the trucks, it never goes on a job. I would put that here because that's truly overhead. That's being spread across all jobs. If they're rentals specific for a job, I recommend putting it under materials. Any donations, charity, sponsorships, all that can go here. Okay, then we get into the owner's salary. If it's a single owner, again, I had X amount in the field. So in this example, I had 20,000 of my salary here. Oops. And then I'm going to say I want to make 95,000 total. So the remainder 75,000 is here in overhead. And same thing, Chris, like you said with your PM, if it's half there, then you're going to make them whole here. And if you have a sales staff, marketing staff, designer, estimator that not build out the jobs, we want to capture all that here. If you have an office admin, what do you pay them over the course of a year? Then we got payroll taxes. So this is going to be what you pay the government for all the payroll taxes. If you have no idea, it's pretty, I can confidently tell you 10 to 12% of your total payroll will get you pretty darn close. So to get that, add up any salaries here. So we're about 100 grand on overhead, and I go back to here, and I'm at 200. So I'm about 300,000 in overall payroll. So I would put 30,000 here as my guess. And again, monitor that through the year, adjust accordingly. Any gifts and bonuses, if it's for the field crew, I would have probably accounted for it there. Don't double dip. If this is a bonus for my office admin, my salesperson, I could put that here. Then professional services. Are you working with a consultant? Yes or no? What does that cost? What does your accountant cost annually, monthly, whatever? What is your insurance? Insurance is going to be your general liability, auto, and workers' comp. Make sure you've got all three of those covered. Of course, if you have health insurance or things like that, add that in here or make a separate line, but make sure all of your insurance is in here. And again, insurance typically goes up, not down. So if it was 15,000 last year, maybe it's going to be 17 next year. Or I'm buying 2 more trucks, it's going to be 20,000. Again, backwards to influence, forward to what we actually think we're going to do. Professional fees, we're usually putting legal fees. If you work with a lawyer for any reason, if it's a one-off forming a C Corp or something from your LLC or something, that might be here for 1 year. If you regularly are dealing with small claims court, hopefully not, you might have a bigger number. So any legal fees captured there. Small equipment. So job trailer tools, we talked about the miscellaneous equipment over there. That's kind of the same thing as here. So if you have it in miscellaneous, you can ignore this line. If you didn't put anything in miscellaneous, you can use, they all go to the same place. Job trailer tools, I would consider like the smaller stuff, rakes, shovels, wheelbarrows, marking paint. All those trips to Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards that nickel and dime you to death when the guys lose a shovel, break a shovel, things like that. Again, what's a budget you want on that kind of stuff, not the value of all your hand tools. Subscriptions and dues. Typically, this is going to be SynkedUP. QuickBooks, if you have design software, if you're using Company Cam, think about all the things you're subscribing to. You can break it out if it helps you to put line by line or lump them all together. Again, doesn't matter. Postage and delivery, are you doing much with mailing or is it all electronic? That will define that number. Any travel, trainings, trade shows that you're going to go to. So am I going to H&A? I'm going to have airfare, hotel, food, cost of the event. What kind of budget do I want for that? Am I bringing the whole team? Am I going just myself? Give some thought to that. And again, if you're not sure, but you'd like to, put it in here. If you don't spend it, fine. This is just giving you permission to spend it when the time comes. There were utilities. What utilities is the company paying? Is it paying internet? Is it paying cell phones? Is it paying water, electricity, propane, heating oil, whatever it might be? And then do you have a shop dumpster? If you do disposal from jobs that are part of a job, that wouldn't be here. But if you have a general shop dumpster for the little stuff, then that would be here. Office supplies. Again, how much you're spending on paper, ink, pens, things like that. And then again, thinking forward, am I going to buy a new computer this year? Do I want to up this one time to cover that new computer? Next year, I'll back it back down. And then shop rent. So if you have shop rent, put that monthly in here. If you're working from your home and you'd like to pay yourself rent, whether you pay it or not, factor that in here. And even if it's small, you kind of start building that into your pricing so that maybe someday you do move out and rent a shop or finance a shop. If you are planning to rent in the future, maybe not even this year, but you like in one more year, I'm going to need to have more space. What would I be paying in rent? Go ahead and throw it in here. You can always back it out if your numbers don't end up where you want it, but start planning for the company you want. That doesn't mean like I'm going to go buy a $10 million property with a $20,000 a month mortgage. Sure, you can put that in here, but that's just probably fantasy land that's going to screw your pricing and you're not going to be competitive anymore. So plan for the future, dream a little, but be realistic as well. So that's kind of the common things most companies have. Now let's go back and think about anything else the company pays for that maybe we forgot. So do I pay health insurance for me as the owner or my top guy or everybody? Put that in here. Am I doing any kind of 401k contributions? That would be in here. Do I buy lunch for the crew every Friday? Put that budget in here. Do we keep Gatorade and coffee and water stocked in the shop? Put that in here. Anything the company's paying for that's not job specific should be captured here in overhead. Any questions on the overhead? Okay. So now that we've got everything entered, we end up here at the overview page. So now I'm going to decide what do I want to make as a net profit margin for my company? What is my ultimate goal there? 15 to 20% is typically what we see. I'm going to urge everyone to be closer to 20 or above. Obviously, there's reasons to adjust that, but if you're in 15 to 20, I would consider you planning well. Of course, if you can go, you got in a good market, you got a niche, you can get 25, 30, by all means, go for it. But typically 15 to 20 is what we see. I don't want to see anybody under 15, and I absolutely will forbid you from going under 10. 10% profit is essentially break even. So try to stay in that 15 to 20, closer to 20 if you can. So with that, with my scenario we just worked through, I'd have a sales goal of 930,000 with a net profit expectation of 186,000. And then, so that's where I kind of sit back as the owner, knowing the company, knowing what's coming up. Maybe I only did 200,000 this year. 900,000 is probably going to be a jump without some major changes that doesn't seem realistic. If that's the case, I'm out of whack somewhere. I don't have all the hours I think I have. My overhead's higher than what it really is. There's probably a million different factors at play. But if that feels right, then I'm also going to have my labor rate here. So in this example, I'm not putting any overhead on anything but labor. So I'm going to mark materials up for profit. I'm going to mark my subs up for profit. All my equipment's in overhead, so I'm not marking any of that up for anything. It's included in my labor rate. So with that, I'd have $95 an hour. If I wanted to, I could put some overhead on materials. I'd say probably no more than 20 typically. So let's just say 15. So if I do that, I get my labor rate down to 88. Now, this is where kind of knowing your market, things like that can come into play. If you're doing mostly quoted work, I'm going to go build the patio for X amount of dollars. It really doesn't matter what your hourly rate is and what your markup on materials is. We're getting to the same $20,000 regardless. If you do a lot of T&M work or maybe a lot of maintenance work, the hourly rate might be more important, more sensitive. So that's where you might want to play with different scenarios. But again, everything I put on the material and all the overhead I put on the material here now makes this number much more important. The labor is your most predictable thing. That's why we want to put the most overhead on labor. So let's just say I do that. I put some on materials. The rest on labor, I'm going to have an $88 an hour. People ask all the time, what is the going rate? I can't tell you that because I'm talking to people all over North America, but I would say for the most part, 70 to 100 is kind of the range I'm seeing for the most part. Of course, there are people higher. Of course, there are people lower, but in the bulk of things, that's where people are falling. So then the other things to look at, kind of once I got this dialed in here, again, is this revenue goal realistic? Overhead, this is typically around 35% of revenue. So if you're at 47, 48%, there might be valid reasons, but you may want to see, hey, am I overhead heavy? Do I have 16 trucks with 5 employees? There are plenty of people I've seen have that kind of scenario. They love their toys and half of them sit in the yard all day, which jacks their overhead up. So if you're anywhere around 35% or less, I would consider you healthy in the overhead ratio. Gross profit is usually over 50%. So that I'm 56 here, so that looks good to me. And again, that labor rate is, I would say, right in the sweet spot of kind of the overall industry that I'm seeing. So in my scenario, if I was sitting down doing a budget review with somebody and this is what we're looking at, I, from my seat, would feel comfortable with this. I don't know the company. I don't know their specific market. So they have to kind of chime in and ask some things too. But from an outsider looking at just metrics here, I would consider this realistic, comfortable. Everything we went through was fair. I would go ahead and activate this and roll with it. So if this number is too high, let's just say it comes in at 160. You're like, there's no way I can sell work at 160. Then something else could be wrong, or it might be very accurate that you'd have to charge 160 for the company you have. If that's the case, and you need to get that down, obviously cutting overhead will do that. Or if you're like, no, there's tons of work out there, I have to charge 100. I can't charge 160. If you can sell work all day long at 100, hire some more people, because the more people you hire, even though there's a cost associated with that, you typically are not raising overhead exponentially by hiring someone. That means your bucket of overhead is getting spread over more billable hours, which gets that hourly rate down. So don't go hire people just to hire people to get your rate down if you can't sell the work. But if the work can be sold at a price, then that can be a variable that can be used to get your rate down to sell that. Does that all make sense? Or raise any questions?
You said I just wanted to clarify about the sweet spot of the hourly rate. Is that maintenance or is that quoted work?
I'm going to say that's combined.
Okay.
Maintenance will certainly be on the lower end, and install would be more towards the higher end, but averaged out, even maintenance, I don't think should be under 70. Again, my opinion, take it or leave it. And so this is, again, too, as a business owner, you go through this exercise and you put everything in. Maybe you are more 50-50, so you pull your larger equipment out of overhead to reduce that burden on the maintenance. But if it comes out to, let's just say this $88 an hour, and you're like, well, I can only sell maintenance at 50 in my market, that's when it takes a long, hard look in the mirror of, is it even worth doing maintenance? If there's just a million guys out there that are willing to undercut and do it for 40, do you want to fight that battle? Because you're not going to make any money because your company needs 88 to operate. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. There are a million reasons that you might want to continue doing maintenance, even as a loss leader. It leads to more install work. It leads to, if the recurring revenue is necessary, there's a million variables. But I encourage, there's a lot of people I meet with that are heavy maintenance, but their company says they have to charge, let's say 88, and like, well, I can't. then why are you doing it? Because you're not making any money.
That's why I had asked that, because that range seems like that's basically was the range that was being used 15 years ago when we started doing the work. It's like people aren't changing their prices, so you get stuck in the endless loop, especially now that when you have to go get, whether it's your small equipment, your mowers, or you got to go get your plow fixed or your truck worked on, these places are creeping up to about $200 an hour in shop labor. So to see, a $70 an hour low end labor and still fighting with people to get the work, to me seems crazy when so much has changed in the last 15 years, especially from 2020 on.
Right. But again, in this example, which I feel is somewhat realistic, with a 20% net profit, which is very nice, it's putting me at 88. That will comfortably give me everything I want here.
Mm-hmm.
If I can charge more, by all means, do it. And if you're like, hey, I charge 95 all day long, great. That just means you're going to have higher profit. What exact? Yeah. All right. So 25 would put me at $95 an hour. So do it. Go for it. But to your point, like, yes, mechanics are up at $200 an hour for sure. I don't truly know their overhead structure, or if they're just making massive amounts of profit. I don't really know that. All I know is by plugging in reality, for this example anyways, this is what I have to charge to make this company work.
It makes sense. I was just speaking on because when you gave the number, like I said, it just seems crazy when you're thinking of it from a number perspective. This is facts. Everything's here.
Yeah.
It's a true representation. But again, going back, it's like people were charging, $70 an hour in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question for you on this page, for instance,
Yep.
in your example. So if you're like if I'm looking at mine, now I'm going through mine and I've already had it pretty much done. I just hadn't applied it yet, but like on mine, it's showing that my revenue per hour is 101. Yeah, so like where you're showing 120. So, but I know by the data that I keep that we're above that. So we're probably closer to a combined blended revenue per hour, probably of 110 or maybe even 120. So I guess my question is like, is there any way to change, like to get a true accurate representation? Is there any way, like, because I can't go to revenue per hour and change that, and it changes everything else.
Right.
Is there like what?
Well,
the only inputs is what we've gave it, right? So I mean, like,
yeah.
the only input on this page is the desired profit.
Right. So the profit could change, or the man hours, the billable hours would change.
Okay.
To get to that.
I'm gonna tag on with Chris though, Fred. I think Backhouse for you guys, that revenue per hour is calculated off that man hour number, that 7,700, and not off of billable hours. Just the way wherever that sits so that 930 is being divided by 7,700 to come out at 120. So that's revenue per every single employed hour as opposed to revenue per production hour.
I can look into that.
I don't know if that's part of what you're seeing, Chris, is that like you actually have to be, or you want to be over what this is showing.
Well,
because it's factoring in unbillable hours.
Yeah. Like
I mean, every time we run estimates, that's, it's like, oh, this is a 3-day job. 3 days should bring in X amount in revenue. And right. So,
yeah, you're right. It looks like that is the case. Okay. Let me get with the team on that one.
Another curiosity, Fred, being able for the just small handful of us to sit in the room with you and kind of hear things like overhead typically would be in a 30 to 35% range. we're benefiting from your knowledge. I know from the one dark month of being on LMN several years ago, they kind of have like each tab tied to sort of industry averages, and I think that is even towards maintenance, blended, and install. Has there been any talk of you guys using kind of us as the data pool to be able to, so that I don't have to go in the room and sit with you, but I can get a guess for, I'm in line with Chris because SynkedUP is aggregating that and then sharing it so that if I sit down, it doesn't have to be live with you and take up your time. It's, oh no, this looks pretty good. Or I can't sell $120 an hour work, but I can sell 90 and my overhead's just shot because it's at 45 or 50%. Right. To be able just to kind of put some guardrails on the DIY budgeting.
So to your point, yes, it's something we've definitely talked about and in great detail. The challenge on the back end is not everyone enters their data as clean as the three of you I'm looking at right now, or probably the people on this call. We've got plenty of people that half-heartedly use it or are brand new and everything's a guess and it's not really accurate. So it's like
when I pulled in my driveway yesterday,
we can't just pull our users and say here's the average because it won't really mean much.
Knocked over, and I was like,
so if you're looking at our data, you're gonna pull data that's maybe not that's static instead
there's
of
gonna be a bunch of bad data.
Yeah,
skewing it. So the challenge is like, how do we decide a true company that's doing it right?
Yep.
And really include those. That's where we've kind of hit the roadblock why we don't have that already.
Yeah.
So we'll figure it out. We'll get there. But yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
But I think your call out on that revenue per hour is valid. So I'm going to look into that.
I've got one other kind of nitty gritty technical piece. So thinking about that updating budgets throughout the season, there's that, December right now, really want to go either hire that guy or buy that piece of equipment. Next year happens and it's totally different than sitting inside watching the snow and making spring wishes. Updating the budget, we're on top of the piece that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. And I know Chris was kind of talking to this, is that the budget is always not next calendar year, but it's the 12 months from today, which I'm not sure if that's still quite sunk into my head, but how that ties back to costing and analysis and looking at the job that just happened, if it got bid on an old budget and now we're looking at it with a new budget. And so what looked like a sweetheart job on the old budget, now we added all this overhead or we did X, Y, Z. And so all of a sudden, like, hey, wait, I thought I was going to come out good on this job, but I've done the work of updating a budget and costing and analysis and job costing is kind of being run off of the new numbers. Is that happening when a budget gets applied? Is it like what budget is being pulled for job costing?
The estimate should always be what the job was created on, but your actuals should be on what's current.
And current being
the currently applied budget.
Applied to budget year that we're in? Like, does that tick over?
Yeah.
So like next year's going to be job costed off of a 26. So like the system's looking at the calendar date.
Yes.
So if I'm forecasting next year, that's not going to screw up being able to job cost the end of this year.
Shouldn't. No.
Okay. This was awesome, Fred.
Good.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question, but it may just lead into kind of a piggyback webinar onto this because it has to do with budgets. Is when you're doing your budget and forecasting for the next year and growth, how do you know when to add people and to plan for that next step? So say you want to push for your budget next year, you want to bring in another $100,000 or $200,000 in revenue. What do you need to forecast that? How do you know the work's going to be there if you go out and hire those two guys? Do you wait until you're flooded and can't keep up, or do you hire them and wait for the work to come in? Like you said, build for the company, the future. So that's kind of the only thing I have left as we're working on the budget, and that may just lead into a different webinar.
Yeah, it certainly could be. It gets into as Weston likes to call it, the different levers you can pull to tweak things, right? So if you just want to expand revenue and profit, then you might just increase your net profit number a point, 5 point, whatever it might be. It's when that then starts to get your hourly rate to where you're outpacing the market that then, okay, maybe I need to go hire somebody to get that back into the market and still end up with the same bigger number at the end.
Okay. So if your numbers outpacing the market, you obviously, like you said, you got to produce more billable hours, which means bring in some people, which means you need to put some more money into marketing to get more leads in to sell the work.
Potentially. Yeah. There's a million different variables there, but like, just for example, some people, it's hard to get their head around, like spending more money actually gets my price down. But just say I'm going to go hire somebody else at 22. They're going to have the same 1,800 hours, same unbillable overtime. So I go hire this new person come spring. My hourly rate just went down $11 because probably by hiring that one person, my overhead's not going to change much. Sure, workers' comp's going to change a little. Sure, payroll taxes are going to change a little, but not a whole lot. So I have that same pool of overheads getting spread over more hours, which gets this down.
So I've got a question then. So, but if you've already been selling work at $88 an hour, and you obviously you sold enough work to add extra people, you wouldn't reduce it down to 78.
No. So then I would bump up to get back to the
right. Gotcha.
88.
Yeah, I know that bringing that, like you said, people, it's hard to wrap your head around hiring somebody, bringing the cost down. I know that. I guess my question is the hard thing is if I bring this person in, how do I know the work's going to be there and I'm not going to blow out? Because I know that adding that person in, if those hours aren't produced from this potential new hire, that can completely blow your budget and go south the other way. So that's where I was going with that question. And, at what point, how do you plan for the new hires and the additional work into your budget?
Risk equals reward, Sean.
Yeah, the budget can't necessarily answer that question.
You could see, so I think we've been in a similar spot, and in Fred's scenario here, there's $300K sitting in profit. You're paying a guy $40K to try to shoot for this budget, and he bills out 0 hours. Worst case, your profit went from a 30% crazy healthy 300K down to 280. So that would be one piece, I think, in the budget that can help you understand that risk. Is this a risk, or I think I was basically trying to do that in pricing myself out of the field, was like, okay, what does it do to hourly rate? What does it do to profit? Like if I bring somebody else on, and rather than just like me losing some hours and I don't care, I got to foot this payroll. Well, if the profit's there to cover that payroll without the projects coming in, or, Fred could type in that 10% floor after adding that fifth person and see, well, okay, this is we got to sell this. And if this is flat revenue from last year, then it's probably good, but let's plan for that fifth guy. Let's price in, a healthy profit so that if the work doesn't come in, at least I'm pricing the 8 out of 9 months in a place that's going to still carry me.
That was a great, that was an answer. I didn't even think about that. Look at and see how it affects the bottom line.
Yeah, the other thing, Sean, is the budget worksheet isn't going to tell you whether to hire that person or not, but it will allow you to play with the different scenarios of what happens if I hire this person.
Yeah.
What happens if I don't hire this person? What happens if I hire this buy the excavator I want? Like
And
it
that was
allows
the-
you to forecast what will happen.
It's your weather forecast for money. 30% chance of rain. Do you go out to work today or not?
I didn't even think about it. Like you guys
70%
said,
chance of rain, different decision.
the budget does tell you that. I wasn't like looking for the budget. Tell me, it was more of a rhetorical question to all of you guys. But the answer, you guys, it was right there. It's play around with things and see how it's switching around your net profit and affecting it. That's the way to find out if you can do it or not or whatever.
Well, I think the like for us too is it's going back and updating it. And I didn't do that this year. I should have. But like when we were in at the end of June, we had maybe like you all, I don't know, we had record rain in spring. It killed production. So we were shooting for 1.4 this year, and we're sitting at like 900 right now. So we severely underestimated what we could do this year.
Yeah, and again, there is zero shame in adjusting this through the season to meet reality. Like if you do that, you will stay. Yeah, the big revenue number might change, but we want this profit to maintain itself no matter what we're doing.
Well, and the hard part, like you said, is the overhead, because if you're budgeting for one, it's like per se like $1.5 million, and you've got the overhead at 32%, but you do 900,000, then you're at 46%. I mean, so it's
Yep. But there's power in even knowing that you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Most people don't even know that, and then it's all of a sudden it's way too late.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? We've kind of gone long here, which is fine on my end, but I don't want to keep you guys all night. So, assuming you know how to act, once you've got this where you want it, you hit apply, hit the year, it'll take you, dump the numbers in there. Once you save it there, then it's affecting the rest of the program. And also don't forget to update your average wage in your item catalog when you make changes. So if you do that, then you'll be matching this number in your catalog. Okay. Anything else?
Oh, hey, I do have one quick question.
Yeah.
So, used to be we put in how many days we worked per year. Is that not anymore?
It'll be back.
Okay.
When we updated this page, when we did our budget builder, we neglected to allow this to be edited. So that'll be fixed here in the near future.
Is there a way to pull any kind of report on data center to see actually how many days we worked last year or this year? Because like, for instance, like I said a while ago, we had all that rain in spring. So we were some weeks in the spring, we were working 3 days a week. So without me actually going in and looking at the calendar, I don't know how many days we actually did work.
The quick answer is not really. You could pull a time report and get hours and then average that out by 8 hours a day or whatever your day is and kind of back into it.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
Yep,
Well,
thanks,
thank you guys. Yeah, I appreciate the engagement. It always makes this more fun on my end. So thanks for joining. And any questions, you want to dive deeper into something, I'm always available.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, guys. Take care.
See you guys.